I researched verb production in people with aphasia, and I'll be talking about verb network strengthening treatment. I used the Darley definition for aphasia. So, in order for aphasia to be present, brain damage must occur. There must be deficits in all four modalities of verbal language, although these can vary in severity. The primary deficit must be with words and cannot be explained by any other deficit. And lastly, this problem with words will present as a reduced availability, efficiency, and/or auditory retention span of words. Anomia is a problem with all content words, so this includes nouns and verbs. However, people with non-fluent aphasia specifically have a harder time with verbs. The type of verb also makes a difference. Transitive verbs, such as write, are easier than intransitive verbs, such as yawn. And a verb is transitive when it requires an object. As we know, verbs play a pivotal role in connected speech. Lisa Edmonds is the primary researcher behind this treatment. It is a remediation approach, and it is a semantic treatment which seeks to improve lexical retrieval of words through the conceptual connection between verbs and thematic roles. Thematic roles are the agents and patients that surround a verb. We know that semantic association is oftentimes a strategy used by people with aphasia, and this is evident in instances of semantic paraphasias. The theoretical premise behind this treatment is that semantic verb networks act as neural networks, and these strengthen through repeated activation and use. This treatment adopted the verb as core treatment for improving sentence production. And the verb is central because it not only links the agent and patient, but it specifies their relationship. This treatment also implements that a verb is dependent on its thematic roles. That is, verbs prime typical agents, patients, instruments, and vice versa. And I have some examples listed for you here. Also, by increasing word specificity, people with aphasia can become more efficient and effective communicators. And lastly, training verbs by creating networks reinforces subject-verb-object structure, which fosters sentence production. So here's an image of a verb thematic network taken from one of Edmonds' studies. Researchers selected verb pairs and possible agent-patient pairs. So the verb pairs were rated on their level of semantic relatedness, and the agent-patient pairs were rated on their level of typicality. This first study included 4 participants with moderate aphasia, 2 fluent and 2 non-fluent. Researchers developed a termination criteria, and all 4 participants met this criteria by 4 weeks. Researchers wanted to know if treatment would generalize to SVO utterances, incorporating both trained and untrained verbs. They wanted to see if treatment effects were maintained and if verbs not directly related to treatment improved. There was evidence for generalization for both trained and untrained verbs in sentences. All participants showed some level of maintenance. Naming and sentence production tasks displayed improvements in retrieval of noun and verbs. And lastly, 3 of the 4 participants produced more complete utterances. So this preliminary study showed very promising generalization for this treatment. Next, researchers wanted to study the treatment effects for a more severe population. They looked at 2 participants with moderate to severe Broca's aphasia. As expected, baseline and treatment phases lasted longer. Treatment lasted 15 weeks for the first participant and 12 weeks for the second participant. And that was so that they could reach the termination criteria in time. Researchers were interested in the magnitude of change on probe sentences containing trained and untrained verbs. They were also interested in the level of maintenance for up to 5 months post-treatment. Researchers also wanted to know if there would be improvements in naming, sentence production, correct information units, and functional communication. Participant 1 showed generalization of trained verbs only, whereas participant 2 showed generalization for both trained and untrained. Participant 1 improved in naming nouns, whereas participant 2 improved in noun and verb naming. Both improved their Western Aphasia Battery scores, lengthened their utterances, and were deemed more functional communicators by themselves and a caretaker. It's important to know that participant 2 used writing when she couldn't verbalize to select agent-patient pairs and responded to half of the weekly probes in writing. Also, due to participant 1's underwhelming outcomes, they modified one of the treatment steps, step 2, to include the repetition of the verb aloud. And I'll get into the steps in a little bit. The final study that I'm covering included a group of 11 participants with a variety of aphasia classifications. The study did not have a termination criteria. Instead, it lasted for a total of 10 weeks, training one verb per week. Researchers wanted to know if the changes made to treatment protocol resulted in any significant group improvement. They also wondered if there would be significant changes in discourse and functional communication abilities. There was not a significant difference in sentence production, but there was a significant group improvement in picture description tasks, noun and verb naming accuracy, percentage of complete utterances, and 7 of the 11 participants showed clinically significant improvement on post-treatment aphasia measures. Overall, treatment made a positive impact for participants. Researchers took a more in-depth look at the previous 11 participants. They wanted to see individual sentence production impairments before and after treatment. They were hoping that this would help them to understand the different linguistic variables that impact generalization of treatment. What they found was a wide variety of participants were able to generalize skills in some way. And also, participants improved on lexical retrieval the most. So in this treatment, participants generate agents and patients themselves. By doing this, they're producing very diverse schemas related to trained verbs, which promotes activation to untrained verbs. No pictures are used during therapy. This is so that participants must retrieve their own representations, and by doing this, it doesn't become a memory task. Participants answer WH questions, and they do this in a way that doesn't limit them, such as maybe a picture description task might. And lastly, syntactic elements are embedded. So by training verbs and syntax together, there's a huge potential to create stronger neural pathways between a verb network and sentence structure. Blank index cards are the preferred material. You want to have cards with WH questions. Select a variety of verbs beforehand, as much as 30 to 50, and then together with the client, you will choose 10 verbs to train. And going back to transitive verbs, these have to be appropriate verbs, so they have to take on 2 arguments and be at the center, such as the waiter folds the napkin. So first, you want to place the who and what cards down with the verb in the middle. Let's say the verb is drive. You pose the question, who might drive someone or something? Write the responses down and place them in the corresponding column. We want the client to generate 3 to 4 agent-patient pairs. Remember, only semantic cues are used in this treatment, so if they need it, have foils prepared and make the client have a choice of 4 possible words. Next, have the client read their responses aloud. If needed, do choral reading or have them repeat after you. Next, the client picks one response to expand on and will answer WH questions where, why, and when. If the client does not understand one of the WH questions, provide a forced decision, such as, does your dad drive a boat in the lake or on a football field? Afterwards, the client reads the responses aloud. Next, the clinician reads aloud 12 sentences, and the client decides if they're semantically correct. So these 12 sentences are made up of correct target sentences, sentences with inappropriate agents, patients, and thematic reversals. And the level of difficulty can be increased by asking the client to also identify the incorrect word. Step 5, the client is simply asked what verb they're working on. It just gives them another opportunity to recall the trained verb independently. And in step 6, we repeat step 1 without any visual cues. Here's just an at-glance look of steps 1 through 6 for the treatment protocol. And then here's a form that you can use during treatment. Thank you.